Our featured guest today is Michael Mirolla. Michael Mirolla's awards for novella, short fiction, novels, and poetry include the 2020 Hamilton Literary Award for Fiction, as well as 3 Bressani Prizes. When not busy writing, Michael helps run Guernica Editions, a Canadian independent literary publishing house. Born in Italy and raised in Montreal, Michael now makes his home outside the town of Gananoque in the Thousand Islands area of Ontario. His latest work, How About This?, was published by At Bay Press in late 2025. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
The format of your book is very different, and the layout is very different, using a different structure. Would you kind of like to describe that for our listeners and why you chose that?
Well, the actual layout is not my my work, right? That's the publisher's work. That's Matt's work. But if you're talking about the metafictional aspects of the work, then then it's a uh, how do I say it? What I try to do in my writing is to sometimes point out the actual art of writing. What does it mean, as opposed to just telling a story. Telling a story is important, and this story is important for me as well. But what I try to do is to bring in self-reference in my work, so that the reader, in a way, looks at how a piece of fiction is put together. And I do that quite often. This is not something new. What I tried to do in this one was I started off with a series of false starts, for example. So you get these things with fiction where everybody always tells you, the mentors tell you, no, you've got to start off with a really hard-hitting sentence, some sentence that really is going to get the reader right in there. Well, in this one here, I spend a few pages just talking about how is this the right way to approach it? Okay, so I described a couple of things, and then I said, well, no, my readers told me that this isn't really working. It's not really working. The idea behind all that, of course, is that the novel is supposedly written by an AI collective from the 22nd century, at a time when AI has taken over the world. So human beings, as the AI collective says, human beings are no longer able to tell their own stories. So this AI collective, writers collective, decides, man, maybe we can tell human stories and as a from an AI collective point of view. However, the AI collective is very young and very working its way through certain things. So it kind of doesn't know how to start things. It gets confused with natural idioms, for example. I spend a lot of time in the novel talking about. Then I use footnotes in the novel as well as part of the structure to help. Some of the footnotes are jokey, they're funny kind of things. Some of them are serious. I also use critic at the end of the novel. There's a section where a critic criticizes the writing in the novel, and the critic is a person by the name of Michael Mirolla, who who is not all that bought on the fact that this was written by an AI collective. His claim is that he did a search of the novel and found that the word love was used, I forget, 44 times, I think it was. And he says, no, there's no way an AI collective could have written this, because they don't have any feelings. They don't know what the word love means or anything of that sort. So that's the kind of structure around it. However, at the same time, I always say, and writers of speculative fiction and of metafiction have to be aware of this, that you can't allow the structures of that sort of writing to overpower the story, because then you're basically writing some sort of thesis or something of the sort. So I always say that this kind of writing, in particular, needs what I call a beating heart at the center of it. And in this case, the beating heart is the actual story, the couple that find the twins on the back porch, and then they create a family from this, and how the family goes forward is what the story is really all about. So,
It's interesting that you've made reference to footnotes and how they're used. Footnotes, which in this case cite references, add context, or even etymology, are featured on every page of this book, sometimes take up half the page. Footnotes are generally associated with academic nonfiction. So why did you choose to make them such a major part of this overall story?
I was just having fun with a lot of it. But I think again, it has to do with the way I look at it. It has to do with the AI collective writing this, and how would the AI collective compute, bring all this kind of information together? Well, you have two choices. You can put it right into the story, which would have really created a problem in the story, because then you'd be interfering with the story all the time, or you do footnotes. I've tried footnotes before in a novel that I did, and then at the end I took them out because they weren't helping the story. But I thought in this case, the footnotes, like I say, some of them are funny. Some of them are criticizing other Canadian novelists in one case. So the footnotes also give some kind of context in some cases about, and actually says something about the story itself. I thought they'd be an addition to the novel, which I hope they are. I mean, so you can read the novel, you can read it without the footnotes. Read it all the way through if you want. You'll be missing a few things. There'll be some gaps in there, but you'll be missing also the story itself of these footnotes, and how, the author is making fun in many cases, and adding things, improving. I'm not sure if improving is the right word. Adding to it, where it talks about the number three, for example, and how we use that, how the three is so valuable in, and it has to do with the three of the baby carriage, and then in the footnote it talks about three being one of the most important numbers in the Trinity, for example. The religious versions of three, and it's used very often. Three is a that's important to human beings. The AI collective is telling us this in the footnote, that this three is an important number. They don't understand. The AI collective doesn't understand why three is important. They don't. They're not nothing to them. But as they're telling human stories, they need to include these. So I mean, yeah, some people complain about footnotes. They don't like them. But in this case, I think the footnotes are part of the metafictional aspect of the novel. I think it's one of the elements, as there are lists in there as well. That sort of thing is included in the novel. So I hope that answered the question. I'm not sure if it did or didn't.
Yeah, it did. And I'm interested in digging a little bit deeper into what you're saying about the AI collective, because one footnote just says satire,
Mhm.
right? So I'm assuming that's the AI collective saying, this is satire, and this is, it's trying to identify things. In what way is this particular book a satire of current issues with AI writing?
It's easy to spot what an AI novel is. And that's where part of the satire, I think, in this one is. It's easy to spot when AI is writing, because although they can put things into context, there's something always missing from it. And I think that what's missing is the feeling, the heart that human writers put into their writing. AI doesn't have that. It's just gathering information from all over the place. Now, my AI collective doesn't do that. I've set them in the 22nd century, at which point I my argument would be that AI is no longer just aggregating material from all around the world. It is now observing the world itself and making comment on those observations, as opposed to just going through millions of pieces of write, and coming up with being able to be a super Google. Basic is what AI is right now, right? But my AI collective is not that. My AI collective is set at a time when AI is running things, and they now have the eyes on the world that the human beings had previously. They're the apex predator, as it were, and so they see the world, and how AI would see the world as if they were human. How would that work? Is part of the for my novel. So, you can easily, I think any reader will say, no, this was not written by an AI collective. This is written by a human being. It's kind of, that's fairly obvious. So the satire is okay. So it's a human being pretending to be AI collective, and the AI collective now coming and writing about human beings. And is that possible? Is that funny? Yeah, I think in some cases it's fun. It's kind of dark humor, and it gets a little darker as well as the novel goes forward. That's the background, I would say, is satire. But satire by itself doesn't really get a reader's attention. A satire is more intellectual. It's something that a reader can say, "Oh yeah, no, that you're making fun of certain things that are taking place today." For example, the thing about uh, the drones that are carrying materials to the university. This is how Elspeth ends up in a critical condition. The drones they carry materials that one of them is a Bible, and the other one is I forget, a Quran or something, I forget, and that's what causes the wind hits them, and they drop this, and Elspeth gets hurt. So the satire there is, of course, you've got these two opposing belief systems all being carried to the same place by these drones that couldn't give a damn about religion or anything else. They're just there to deliver whatever they deliver, just like politicians these days deliver without really caring what the hell they're delivering, as it were.
As a writer who works in both poetry and prose, how do you choose which genre to highlight in a particular work?
Well, the way poetry results when I look at something and I get this feeling inside me, and I start to see images, then I normally would say, okay, I think I'm going to look at that as a poem, a potential poem. The prose is a measured approach. I'm reading something, I'm thinking about what's happening in the world, and then a plot starts to come through, and I start to think about the characters in it. So then I start. This is going to be a piece of prose. So whether short story, novel, that's a different matter. But the difference between at the edges, however, when you think about it, the poetry and prose kind of touch. And there are times when you slip over from one into the other. You might start by thinking that this is going to be a poem, and then, oh no, something intrudes. And I think I write a few flash fictions, and those really, really, in many cases, they tend to fall into the prose poem area.
Do you have any specific literary influences that inspire you to take on a particular genre, subject, or format?
Uh, well, I mean, if for prose, yes. Poetry, no. I mean, there are influences in my poetry, particularly the modern and the 20th century. T.S. Eliot for one, and listening. I on the audio books. There's the audio cast of some of T.S. Eliot's poetry, the Love Song in particular, which is done. Tim Hiddleston. The guy who played what's his name in Loki in the Marvel movies, but he's a great poetry reciter, amazing. Um, for the prose side of because I'm publishing and I'm spending most of my reading manuscripts in order to accept or send a thank you note to. I don't have much time to read modern 21st century writing. So my influences go back to the 20th century mostly. starting Franz Kafka, who captured the 20th century in his existential, and then Joyce for his language, Virginia Woolf for her stream of consciousness, which a lot of people say that Joyce started put together that stream of consciousness that at the end of Ulysses. But Virginia Woolf was doing it before that, or around the same time. And then Samuel Beckett later on with Waiting for Godot in particular, but also his novels. Those are my influences in general. And then some of the metafictional writers, William Gass in the is an influence as well.
And also in this book, you have many references to going further back than 20th century to, is it 17th century English playwright Mary Picks?
Right.
Was real. I don't know
Yeah.
how I haven't tripped over her before. How did you discover her work and then feel inspired to include her in the story as a field of study for one of the characters who's an academic?
Well, I think what happened, I'm trying to remember now. I was doing a search, some quote of some kind that I needed, and I came across a quote from one of Mary's plays. And so, I started looking into it and saw that she was a very interesting character, very interesting person at the time. And I said, okay, I mean, Elspeth is supposed to be a professor of Elizabethan literature and a feminist, so Mary Picks supposedly was as well. And so I thought, okay, that connection there seems to be almost like natural at that point. Once I discovered her, it was fairly natural for Elspeth to be have her as the person as her theory on Mary. In the novel anyway.
Even without the footnoted citations, it's obvious that throughout the narrative that you've done a lot of research on important issues such as AI, gender, intersex, and human rights. Were there issues that surprised you while you were writing this book?
No, the research was a surprise, but that was mostly because I tell people, okay, sometimes I get asked, you write about all these kinds of things out there. Are you in any way engaged in any of that? And I say, no, I'm kind of a regular kind of, but the research is important, and in particular, the research that I found a little difficult was the twins, and I don't want to give it all away, what about the twins, but that was difficult research. Because I had to get it right, and so you have to make sure that this might be a satire, but I wanted the characters, the four main characters, to be. I didn't want them to be stereotypes. For example, you got stay away. I mean, you have a lesbian couple that been married, and so how do they act? How do they interact with? And so to at least make Elspeth and Mary Beth real, and I wanted them to be real. And the twins were a little more difficult, as I say, because they're very special.
So, in this work, would you say that the narrator's hints about the extent of AI and the Turing test, a measure of the success of AI information, are meant to be ironic or a cautionary tale?
Cautionary tale for sure. I'm really, really concerned. I'm really worried about where human beings are going, and have they created a monster that they will not be able to put back in the box. And the stuff about AI writing novels and that sort of thing, that's just it's just out there. The real problems are much more than that. It's the real problems are going to be when AI decides that it needs to take control of us, because we can no longer do it ourselves, and we're showing it very nicely. We're showing that we're not doing a very good job of showing our best side, as it were, as human beings. We always say that, okay, as we move into the 21st century, people are the education system, and people are they'll become more tolerant, they'll become, but is that true? Or is what's happening is that if you have someone who's able to bring out the worst in human beings, that worst will come out in most human beings. So my fear is that at some point, and we're already seeing it, there's stories about AI escaping. Whoa, this is getting a little scary, a little. I mean, human beings are supposed to be the ones who have this sort of thing, not AI. But we've opened the door, we've let AI in, and now I think it's going to be very difficult to fight it. Okay, so in the 1920s, right, there were all kinds of starving because of the depression. Most people were just barely hanging on and stuff. And yet, when you see some of the movies that come from that period, it's all everybody ballroom dancing and top hats, and then having champagne, which they weren't allowed to even have, but it all came out that way. And so in some it's like you're making fun of what's going on, and that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm making fun of it, but at the same time, a sequel to this, which has already been accepted. I've already signed the contract for it, and the sequel is a little more serious. And the sequel is about one of the twins who's supposed to be eliminated at the end of this. But Ariel argues with the AI collective, and Dupree is given and to go search for Malik, the twin. The AI collective is actually hinting in places that Ariel doesn't get it right. Humanity might be at stake because of this.
Very interesting. Would you like to read from some of your work for our audience?
So this is section 2. It's called Back to 2044 AD. And here come the foundlings. Surprise, shock, double surprise. Of late, it being a form of springtime in both the fast-crumbling city and its barely hanging on suburban outliers, the feral alley cats, rumored to be escapees from gone-right GMO lab experiments with an interest in synthetic testosterone as a way to improve elite soldiers' kill ratios and billionaires' sperm counts, and vice versa, have manifested particularly ardent, feisty attitudes, especially on the increasing number of muggy, sluggish, mugrified evenings when one looks out to the window to find more than a hint of Prufrockian fog dancing around the base of overwrought streetlights, giving them, the streetlights that is, the appearance of being the only real objects in the multiverse, as they invite harakiri attacks from pesticide-resistant mayflies who insist on being on the bright side when immolating themselves. So the wailing at her back door, which has become an almost nightly occurrence, comes as no surprise for Elle, short for Elspeth, a tall, pajama-clad woman, mid to late 30s, with close-cropped hair and a distinct lack of makeup on a pleasant, round, well-nourished, as they say in murder mystery morgues, face. To the point where she has developed a ritual that consists of A, pushing with her butt against the spring-loaded outward opening back door, B, stepping out while one foot holds the door from slamming shut behind her, and C, quickly splashing a bucket of cold water into the night in the hope the shock will dampen, if only temporarily, the Tom's desire for either battle or sex. But as the bold typeface header would indicate, on this particular evening, Elle seems the one in for a shock when she flings the door open and prepares to douse the freestyle feline frolickers. So for the record, here's how Elle would have prepared her story in case of a possible investigation, criminal or simply bureaucratic, and also how she explains events to herself and to her partner, scheduled to make a grand entrance in Section 3. I was expecting snarling cats, or maybe in the clamoring throes of lustful amour with one of their two paramours, one of whom I've come to identify as Sir Eglamour. What else could it be? Howling cats yesterday, howling cats today. Isn't that what inductive logic tells us? But there on our backyard deck, underneath the motion sensor detector, There was the real source of the wailing, which had in the meantime stopped. Infants, two of them side by side in a stroller, two infants tightly wrapped in blankets. They used to call them swaddling clothes, no? That were a combination of pink and blue. Like whoever had done the wrapping couldn't make up their mind. Two infants side by side in a mauve-colored, ultra-modern, altogether spiffy, triangular wheeled, two-seater tandem stroller. I'll stop there. Think
That's
that's
a great spot. And that's a great introduction to the novel. So, Michael Mirolla, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. Michael Mirolla's latest work is How About This, published by At Bay Press. Thanks again, Michael.
Thank you for having me. All the best.